It's cold. That's your meteorology moment with Matt. It'd be great to be a meteorologist, because on a day like today, you just say, it's cold, and that's it. That's all it needs. I did a cold plunge, my first one today, walking to my car. That's what it felt like. It is so cold. My hands are always kind of cold. I've talked to Troy in the sound booth about this. Always cold. I remember shaking this lady's hand, I don't know, it had to be 15 years ago, because her remark, it might be an old thing that old people just say, it's like one of their lines, but for me it was new. I shook her hand, she goes, ooh, your hands are cold, this deficiency of mine. And she said, you must have a warm heart. And so I just think about that, like, it is cold, and this is like the warm heart, that Christmas beckons us into this communal thing, and this is happening all over our town, this is happening all over our state, all over our nation, all over the globe, that people are gathering like this to think about Christmas, to ponder. What does it say? Mary pondered these things and treasured them in her heart. And then Nativity, the things going on. And that's what we get to do. And there's this warmth that gets created in that. So I think there's a beauty, even when it's cold, to come to a place that's semi-warm with a drink in hand and be with people and light up a room is a great thing. I kind of have a plan today, but I'll start with unplanned. It's a story I've told before here. It's one of my favorite Christmas stories from my life. It's just a memory. So we get in a time machine. My sisters and I are age 11, the oldest, to about 3, something like that. I'm making the ages up because when you're a kid, you don't really know. You're just a kid, and then you're like teenage years, and then you become an adult, and it all just kind of runs together. But it was definitely kid, and I know the ages of my sister, and I know when this conversation had to make sense, it had to be in about that range. And what was going on at home is my parents were in this like kind of on and off again separation mode, and it was getting more and more serious, and the separations were longer and longer, and it was just uncomfortable. And my mom's there, she got 4 kids, single mom, trying to do it all, and now the holidays are there. There's a lot to keep going, a lot of plates spinning, and she's trying to get all of them going, and finally she just had enough. So about 2-3 weeks before Christmas, she sits all 4 of us down. She had to like prop up the littlest of us. The oldest of us was starting to like have certain ideas. And so what she's gonna try and do is, I'm gonna put this vaguely, question the veracity of a certain Christian personage, all right? If you get what I mean, she was gonna kind of give us reality, a glimpse of adulthood, because I think she didn't want to like keep that one plate spinning any longer. It was just gonna bring a peace to her life. Also, there'd been a bunch of like falsehoods maybe in our house and in her relationship, and so maybe that was part, I don't know. She gives us this hard truth, and we were befuddled, bemused, confused, perplexed, all these things, and then we were kind of angry. We started interrogating her, and we were like, well, what about the cookies? Every year we put out cookies. What about the cookies, mother? You know, you wanted to know all this stuff, and as we're kind of having all these feelings, we hear the jingle jangle of bells outside the house, coming from outside in. We're like, what is that? We all get quiet, and it gets louder and louder. And we run to the windows, and I just remember, I still feel the cold on my hands, my cold hands, having to do this at the windows, and all of our little faces peeping out like cherubs, something you would like draw in a painting. Like we were just all like peeking out to see what this jingle jangle is coming up the lane. And there we see it. It's this slow-moving vessel. It's a horse-drawn carriage. And driving the carriage is a guy dressed in red, kind of rotund with a big white beard. And he's yelling, ho, 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 like coming up our lane. And here's the thing about our lane, no one comes to our lane. Our house was nestled between 2 towns. Our zip code was a mere suggestion. You didn't get accidental visitors. So something about this was purposeful. It was intentional. It was planned. And here comes this guy. He parks right in front of our house. We're the only house down this lane. And he hops out and bumbles forward. And he gives us all treats and calls us by name, all my sisters and me. And we're just like, astounded. This is incredible. We're out there in stocking feet. I don't even know how we got outside. It's just like we apparated out there from the windows. I don't even remember, but we were just there and we were gleeful. And we looked at my mother, what an endearing grace that she had set all this up. Like, this is amazing, based on what she just told us. And then we saw in her face, total surprise. She didn't know any of this was happening. So in that moment, myth became fact. It was like, I believed till I was like 37. It was like, here's this thing that happened, that he came down our lane for us. And that's what Christmas is. It's the coming down the lane where a myth becomes fact and we realize it, that it's truth. And our belief ratchets up, and it's just that everything that we desired, that we always wanted to be true, is. And that's Christmas. So last week I was telling the story of the 1964 TV special, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Well, I got some time to sit and watch it. I had my youngest child on my lap, at least parts of it that he would sit for. And we watched this thing, and there are all these motifs within it. There's all these things. It's actually a delightful movie. I really enjoyed it. But the main theme, the prevailing theme, is belonging and its antithesis. And you have all these people trying to find that belonging, or characters in this story. Like you have Rudolph. You might have heard about him. He's got this red nose. You could even say clothes. That's what he's working with. And he comes out of whatever happens with reindeer. I don't know. I'm not that agricultural. But this Rudolph comes out, and his nose is different than their nose. It glows, and it's weird, and his parents aren't thrilled with it. There's this short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And he's got this perfect daughter. She's like a 10. She's just beautiful in every way, except she has this birthmark on her face, and it's shaped like a hand. And so he can't abide that. And so he comes up with a potion to reduce this birthmark. And as the birthmark reduces, so does she. And when the birthmark finally diminishes completely, so does she, and she dies. And it's just like staggering short story. Well, that's kind of how the Rudolph story starts. His dad is like, this can't do, except they don't like do a potion, they just do a prosthetic. And they put this fake nose on Rudolph, and then he just like tries to hide who he is, who he isn't. He's trying to hide this whole thing. Meanwhile, there's this odd little elf named Hermie, and he hates making toys. He wants to be a dentist, which is something. Like that's what his dream is. And then Rudolph gets booted out of reindeer games, and Hermie is just downright crazy for bicuspids, and he leaves elfdom, and they find each other, and they start singing songs. That's what you do when you find a stranger in the woods. You just start singing, and they start singing that they are misfits. You guys know this? They sing this song, we're misfits. In there it says we're not just nitwits. That'll be next year's theme, Christmas for Nitwits. You're all invited. It'll be great. But they start singing this, and then they just take off and have adventures. And in their adventures, they meet this other guy who I would say is a kind of a misfit. His name is Yukon Cornelius. He's a prospector. Silver and gold, he has none, but he's looking for it. And he does this weird thing. One of my kids is like, that's my favorite character. I was like, why? He goes, he's always licking his axe. Licking his axe is what I said. He is. He just like takes his axe, and he's like, is this gold? And he's like, nom, nom, nom. I don't know if that's a prospector thing. I think you just know it's gold visually, but he has to taste it or something. I think he's weird. I think he's kind of weird. He's a misfit, I would say. There's this snowman, abominable snowman. You might have seen him in the lobby. His name is Bumble. Pretty weird dude, lives alone. He gets the worst deal. He gets concussed in the movie by like some ice or something, and then he has dental assault happen on him. Hermie takes out all of his teeth, which he did not consent to. Like that doesn't seem like that should happen. I was thinking about that as I was watching. It brought a memory up, another Christmas memory. It was the Christmas where my face swelled up like a balloon. One side of my face. I went to bed, normal face, beautiful. And then I woke up, and it was like this huge. And what happened is I had a tooth that was like decaying in there. I don't know. It got really bad overnight. And I had this dentist I went to for a while. It wasn't Hermie. And he said, well, there's a fire back there. And he knew something was wrong. He's like, we're going to take care of that, but we're going to take care of some other fires first. Well, he probably should have taken care of that fire, because when I finally went in, it was like an emergency. They said, if you'd waited another day or two, you probably would have died. It's like, well, let's take care of this. And so I remember they took me in, and they were like, you got to get this tooth removed. So I went to the place where they removed the teeth. I did consent to this, and they put me on medicine, and I'm like getting knocked out. I'm getting woozy. And the nurse is still talking to me. She's like, yeah, we're going to take off tooth number, whatever. And she says the number. And the number didn't sound right to me, but again, I'm woozy. I was like, no. I think we're doing 14. She goes, no, we're not doing 14. I have your chart right here. I think I know what I'm doing. She like kind of came at me, and I was like, okay, I guess she knows what she's doing. And she leaves the room. I made her mad. I didn't mean to. She comes back in a few minutes later. She's like, we actually have another person with your same name coming in, and you're right, we're doing 14. And so then I looked up what tooth she had. It was 8, which is the front middle. So I almost woke up, like all I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth. I almost woke up saying I want one of those, because one of them almost got taken out. And I was like, that would have been so awesome if I could give this story with a whistle, because it also would have meant a lawsuit. It would have been awesome. I would have been driving a Benz. Would have lasted a tooth, but it would have been great. Anyway, that's what happens to Bumble. They take all his teeth out, and then he becomes a decorator. Then the Island of Misfit Toys. That's the big one. And that's where we got the name for this series, Island of Misfit Toys. That these are toys that are forgotten. They're toys that are broken. They're toys that are odd. They just don't quite fit. And so they can't find a place. And then in the movie, a big storm happens, and Santa needs help. And of course, who will light my way? It's Rudolph, and they light up Christmas and take off, and Rudolph saves Christmas. And this came out in 1964, and it was appointment viewing. We didn't stream stuff, so everyone sat at their televisions and watched this thing, millions of people, and it was beloved instantly. It was quirky. It was incredible. And the letters poured in, and the letters mostly said, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. One point of feedback kept getting brought up. All these letters, the fan mail, said, what happened to the Misfit toys? What about the Misfit toys? So much so that they did a new version the following year, and that's probably, if you watch it this year, if you've already watched it, that's probably the version you've seen where they added some lines. And towards the end of the movie, when they decide to go do the Christmas thing and Rudolph's going to light the way and all that, Santa says, "Our first stop, the island of Misfit toys." That's what he says. And then they take the Misfit toys, and there's a scene where they're throwing them out of the sleigh, and it looks a little dark at first, but then they open up an umbrella and float down gently. That the Misfit toys in the following year were taken home. And that's what Christmas for Misfits is. It's not calling someone a misfit. It's saying there's a way home. And the misfit thing where they sing, we're misfits, misfits, it's what we are. If we're honest, I think all of us feel a bit like that we don't fit in. That's why we make about 100 out of 100 the choices we make in what we wear, how we eat, what we like, what we dislike. A lot of it is just trying somehow to fit in. It's incredibly human that we don't fit in, and then we try and counteract that or fake it or fix it or pretend it away, and that's kind of how we run out our days. I'm getting a good look at this right now with my kids, because my kids are starting to get to an age where they're doing this. They're partaking in this, and we didn't tell them, like, do anything you can to be popular, do anything you can to fit in. They just naturally kind of go that way. A big point of contention this semester has been 6-7 for them. You guys know this? There's this number. Yes, someone said, like, don't you talk about it. There's this number, 6-7, that's been floating around. I made a joke about it like a month ago in here in the service, and only one person laughed, so I just didn't know if it was a bad joke or if you guys, I don't know, were behind the times. The one person laughed is the middle school teacher, and they laughed, and I could hear them and locked eyes like, yes, we get it. What happens is there's a number. It's 6-7, and kids go crazy when they hear this number. I think it started with older kids, like college age, and then it's worked its way down to the elementary schools. It was a hip-hop lyric, I think, best I can glean. And then a basketball player who was like a prospect, a college recruit, he rated a coffee or something. He did his hands and he said 6-7. And all the kids, my 3-year-old says 6-7. Like, she says it all the time. Is there a reason they're saying 6-7? Nope. No real answer. My son, who's 8, then started a thing at his school. He's got an anti-6-7 coalition. So when kids start chanting 6-7, they start chanting no more 6-7. And he has these little minions that are the anti-6-7 crew. And so is there a reason that he has an anti-6-7 like agenda? Nope, there's not. There's no real answer unless the answer is this, that life is this westward leading, still proceeding pursuit to be part of something bigger. The reason why my 8-year-old and 6-year-old and 3-year-old, and maybe my 1-year-old is thinking it, are doing 6-7 is because it makes them part of other people who are saying 6-7 as well. This has happened all throughout history. There was a time in history, I think in the 1400s is big, I think it came back in the 1600s because we didn't learn our lesson, where men got real into having pointed shoes. Have you ever seen pictures of this? They're kind of wooden shoes, and then they'd make them pointed, and the more pointy they were, the better. And then one guy, because we have egos, would see the other guy's pointed shoes and be like, you call that a point? And he'd make bigger pointy shoes, so much so that they would like stretch all the way to the end of the stage. They'd be like 2 feet long, and then we had to start curling them. You might have seen these where they curl. And guys would walk around like this because they'd have pointed shoes. And then here's the thing, the mode of transportation in those days, horses. You try and get on a horse. I can't get on a horse anyway. And then you get these weird skis and you're trying to get on this horse and you're poking the horse. That doesn't go well. And what happened is people's postures were changing because they had to walk in these weird shoes. Their feet were changing. There are people who were like being immobilized because of these pointy shoes, so much so that a monarch said you can only have 2 inches or less. They would measure people's shoes, and you have more than 2 inches, they give you a fine. What is that? Here's a more current one, flagpole sitting. Do you guys remember this? Anyone? Remember reading about this? A guy, it was a marketing thing outside a movie theater, and they're like, how do we get more people to this movie? Well, we're going to have this guy sit on top of a flagpole for a couple hours. And he did, and 5,000 people showed up like, look, a dude on a flagpole. And then a bunch of people started doing it. Then this guy on the flagpole was like, that's pretty cool. I'm going to start doing this on my free time. And he set a record, 49 days on a flagpole. They'd basket up his food, and he'd eat it. I guess he'd then use the bathroom in the basket. Hopefully they switched baskets the next day. And he just did that for 49 days, and he was so proud until someone did it for 50. And thousands of people would just come watch and dream about someday sitting on a flagpole of their own. Phone booth stuffing. You heard about this one? There used to be phones that weren't in your pocket. And they're in these booths, and they're these tiny little booths. If you don't know what this is, and you're like 18, look it up. There's these phone booths, and they would just see how many people they could get in this phone booth. I think one record for a while was 19 people. You wouldn't be the first one in. That would be uncomfortable, but just crammed in there, and people would be like, this is awesome, we're doing it. It's so stupid. Christmas, we have some of these. Remember Tickle Me Elmo? Not a great toy, but you sure would think it was. That first year Tickle Me Elmo came out, and like women were losing their religion. And like they were hurting each other. There were fights. It was like they were like ripping each other's hair. It was like wild. The next year you could get it for like $10 and you didn't have to wait in line. It wasn't, I don't know, it was nothing. It was part of something though. Remember Beanie Babies? Beanie Babies were selling for $17,000 at one. Do you know how much it made? Like a lizard Beanie Baby cost to make? It was like 30 cents. You could sell that thing for 17 grand. Here's one of my favorites. I think it was from the 70s. Remember the pet rock? This marketing guy from California was like, I'm gonna put a rock in a box, I'm gonna charge money for it. But no one's gonna buy it. And then 4.5 million people did in the first 6 months. This dude became a millionaire and he bought the rocks, they were like a couple cents each. He got them from Mexico. He just had these round rocks, and he bought like 10. He was like, I gotta get some more rocks. He's buying rocks, selling them for people for like $5, and he made millions of dollars on these pet rocks. What is this that we're doing? This zeitgeist that makes us do the things that we do, even when they're nonsensical. Well, I think there is a hidden sense within them. There's a hidden logic, and the hidden logic is found in the Bible, that the Bible says that we began in paradise. It was this enclosure, this yard. It was like Jurassic Park without the dinosaurs or a Newman. It was like a nice, lush, waterfalls, trees, food. It was wonderful. It was the perfect place. It was for which we were made. That's what we're all longing for. And what happened in that enclosure is sin entered. And with sin came something else that we all feel: shame, doubt, and masquerading against shame and doubt. That all of us deep down have something we're ashamed of. That's probably the thing you're covering up the most. That's why we have like sins that are secret. We don't like put them on our forehead when we come into church. We tuck those away. We don't even want to see them. We try and mask them. It's parts of your body that you're insecure about. What do you try and do? You cover those parts. You hide those parts. You make up those parts. Just like that guy with his daughter, you cover up that birthmark. We all have those things. Well, they had those things all of a sudden enter the scene. And so you either act like you don't, or you're just ravaged that you do, and they got banished. Where were they banished? East of Eden. We've all been banished in some ways, and we feel it east of Eden. So what that leaves us is the choice to try and journey back west, because we are homeless in search of a home. That's what we want. So we've been going west ever since. And where do we go? West. We don't know what to turn to. We just keep going west, and we see a shortcut, or we see a thing that might be the thing, the shiny object. Money. Man, if I could just have money. That's the West. If we could just get the money. $1 more. That's how the old quote goes. We all feel that. And money can make you a little less, what money can give you back a little bit, I think, is time. Makes you a little less stressed. Like if my HVAC goes out today, it's gonna be a big deal. We're gonna do like a GoFundMe. We're gonna need some help. That's gonna be a big thing. If you're super rich and your HVAC goes out, you know what you do? You buy a new HVAC. So you have more time because you have less stress, but what do you fill your time with? You find me a poor person who's unhappy, you find me a rich person, and they'll be equally unhappy. It can give you a little bit of maybe like happy. It doesn't give you joy. That's why you look at celebrities and politicians, 9 out of 10 aren't happy, right? They're miserable. They're still, man, if I had money, I would never fight with my wife. Then we'd have it. And it's like you see all these rich people and they're still getting divorced. Still hating each other, they're still angry, they still have envy, they still have jealousy. So money, it's not the cure. We think it is. Westward leading, still proceeding. If I could just have one more column in my bank account or one more comma, I'd be happy. Nope. Or stuff. Stuff is this way. I do this around my house. We fix up a room or something. I was like, man, if we fix up that room, if we get that room, we get the right chairs in that room, I'm going to be happy forever. And I am happy for 18 days. Like, we should fix another room. That's what happens. Or we do this with relationships. Well, if I could just find the right person, or if the person could become the right person for me, that I can deify like my spouse or my kids in a way where they become gods. And the thing is, they're not God. So when they fail me, not only do they fail me as a human, they fail me as a God, and my entire world is wrecked. And that's westward leading, where we go, that we think there's a arrival, but we're going to all the wrong places to try and get that arrival. Don't, if you're honest, you feel this hedonic treadmill of striving, of hoping, of flailing. Now, I said there's a bit of inner logic to it, and I think there is, and C.S. Lewis found that inner logic. He resolved this tension in his life by succumbing to this notion. He said this: I have found a desire within myself that no experience in this world can satisfy. So the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. He realized that that's the tension of the plot entire, that Rudolph was made for a world with light-up noses, or that Hermie was made for a world that 4 out of 5 dentists approved of, or Cornelius needed riches to make his world go. The toys, they needed a place to call home. It's the tension for us, too, the old original twist that we want to be valued and valuable. We want to be valuable. We want to be part of something. We want to be loved, to be home, sweet home again. And that is the resolution that Christmas brings. That those letters poured in, the change in the 1964 movie, well, the letters poured in from our hearts to God over and over again, over and over throughout the generations, letters of lament, of hope, of need. And God read those letters. God knew those letters before they were written, and he came down to meet us where we were. And by great light, shine us back to him. That he came as Lord, he came as Messiah, he also came as guide, the blessed way to life, to home. Now and always, he comes for the woe-begone misfit, the jokers, the dreamers, and he has since the start. You consider the first Christmas, or even if you go a little bit before the first Christmas, I think it's a beautiful picture, that Jesus was heralded, he was prophesied in the Old Testament, that there's going to be a Messiah, right? It said, there's a child, for unto us a child is born. Do you know there's a second child too? There were actually 2 children that were talked about. There's Jesus, but then there was a forerunner. Jesus is going to be the king, but what a king needs is a trumpeter to go first and say, do, here comes the king. There's going to be a child that comes first who plays that trumpet. There's going to be a herald who comes. And we're told about this herald, and we're told about his parents. It's in Luke 1, 5 through 7. It says this: In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. So these are like good, strong Hebrew people, good lineage. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God. They're righteous in the sight of God. That means God looked at their deeds and was like, man, they're doing pretty good. They're upright. They're walking in my ways. They're righteous in the sight of God. It doesn't say they're righteous in the sight of their community, of their church, of their neighbors. Just God. Only God could see it. Why? Observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. 7, but they were childless. That's why the others couldn't see it. Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Some of us in this room feel this, or we're related to people who feel this. Like, kind of what infertility makes you feel like. That if you have infertility, you're going to go to a holiday thing this year, and someone, your aunt probably, is going to say, when are you two going to have a child? And you're going to say, oh, we don't know, but deep down you know that you've been trying for 7 years and nothing's worked. And you feel about this big. And you feel shame, and you feel like you're not enough, and those are lies. So if you are in that, or someone you know is in that, remind them that that's a lie, that they are seen, they are known, they are loved. They are not less than. I've lived both of those extremes. I've lived the extreme where people told us we weren't going to have kids, and we had way too few kids, and now I live the extreme where I think we have maybe a couple too many. And the reality is there's no such thing as too few or too many, that God's plans are good, he is faithful. But there's this kind of social faux pas about not being able to have kids. It's times 1,000 in their generation. That the sign of a righteous person on the external was a full quiver, meaning you had kids. And the more kids you had, the more righteous you were. That's why you read about some Old Testament people who's like, you had 12 kids, you had 14 kids, and it's like, that is like a boastful thing, especially if you had male sons. It's a big deal. So these people were righteous, they were keeping the commands, but the community looked at them and was like, oh, yeah, what did they do? Looked at them like Job. Like, yeah, they got some skeletons in the closet. If not, God would bless them. God obviously doesn't approve of them. He doesn't bless them. They weren't enough. They were passed over. They were gossiped about. You know what they were? They were misfits. And then you know what God did? Even though they were way too old, they got pregnant. And then we get this glimpse in verse 39. So they're expecting now. It says in verse 39, at that time, Mary, who is the mother of Jesus, she is with child at this scene. She is carrying Jesus in her womb. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried down to the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. They were family. They're related, so she's going for a visit. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice, she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promise to her. Jesus' first visit wasn't to the manger. It was to these geriatric maternity ward. It was to these misfits. That's who he went to visit. And what happens to them, they're already like feeling great because they're going to have their first child. Also now their joy redoubles because they're met with the Savior. And their son would be called John the Baptist, and he would herald the way. He'd start his ministry before Jesus. He was a little bit older than Jesus. And he would be the harbinger of Jesus. Joy. That's what they felt. That he leaped in the womb because Jesus had come. We see in Luke 2 another group of misfits. This is verse 8. It says, and there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He's the Messiah. So they have heard about the Messiah. Everyone had. If you're from that lineage, you'd heard about the Messiah. What happened in the Old Testament is things didn't go so well. And there's always like, it'll get better when the Messiah comes. There'll be a Messiah. There'll be a Messiah. And there was 400 years where they didn't hear a word from God. They're like, maybe there isn't going to be a Messiah. And then all of a sudden, the word Messiah is used again, and he's coming. And we're telling you. They would have gotten this language and been like, in awe. That's why they're afraid. This is great tidings. But is it true? Is it real? Well, he'll be the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths, lying in a manger. Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth, peace to those in whom his favor rests. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, I love this, let's go to Bethlehem. Yeah, it's a pretty good advertisement. Like, you want to check it out? Oh, one shepherd's like, nah, I think I'll stay with the sheep. No, of course they went. I love that they had a choice. We have a choice. We have a choice here today to Christmas or not to Christmas. They had a choice to go to the manger or not. It was a vulnerability. It was a risk. They could look foolish. They went. Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. And then that verse I mentioned earlier, but Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. And I'll just go a little bit farther. Why not? The shepherds glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just that they had been told. Shepherds in those days, that wasn't a job like you went to school for. It wasn't a job you were recruited for. That wasn't where the valuable people went. Shepherding was for the uneducated, the unclean, and the unreliable. And they were watching their flock by night. They were the night shepherds. They were the graveyard shepherds. They were the worst and the youngest, the worst shepherds. They were the guys who were poor and who were smelly laborers. And you know what they became? The first evangelist. We just read Acts, and it wasn't like the apostles were the first evangelists. Like the apostles did a big thing. I'm not trying to take away from them. The ones chosen to herald the message first in human form, not angels. It goes angels and then shepherds. These dudes without degrees, these blue-collar laborers. In this wonderful picture, everyone wanted to hear what they had to say, too. The uneducated became the educators. You think they weren't having fun? No one's ever listened to these guys, and all of a sudden they're like hoisting their foot up on the table at the bar and giving a speech. It's this amazing thing. You know what it is? It's a picture of joy. More misfits. We go back, take a left turn to Matthew, his version of this. Let's see if we can find it here. Right book. Getting closer. There we are. So this is 2:1. It says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, magi, wise men, as we know them, from the east came to Jerusalem. So they come from the east. So if they come from the east, they're headed west. Westward leading, still proceeding. And there's a scene in here, and we sang in a song too, that the star was in the east. No, the star starts in the east, and it heads, and they follow yonder star to the west. This is a weird thing that's going on here, is they're headed west, east of Eden, headed west, And yet the star originated in the east, and that's where they followed it, and they're from the east. This is the meeting of east and west. This is worlds colliding. The east and the west become one. That the sun sets in the west, but on this day it rises too. And it's westward leading, still proceeding, and you don't have to proceed any more west once you arrive at your destination. You get that? I can't be more home than home. They stop. I love that film is stop motion. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. You stop motion. You stop, and then you get more emotion because you arrive at the thing that you've been seeking your whole life. It says in 2:10, I'll pick up at 9. After they had heard the king, they went their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them till it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. There it is again. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. And they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That's why we think there are 3, because there are 3 gifts. There might have been 7 of them. There might have been 12. We don't know. What we do know is they were overjoyed. That they were far from home, and yet this is this great homecoming. This was more home than they've ever been. They empty their pockets, and yet they are full. This is what finding Jesus is. It's this acknowledgement that we belong forever, and we finally found what we've been looking for. We finally found what we're supposed to belong to. This is the old song says, "O Lamb of God, I come, just as I am, without one plea." They just show up. They were misfits. They didn't belong there. They didn't speak the language. They didn't wear the right clothes. Yet here they are, laying their treasures at the feet who's returning to them an even greater treasure still. Maybe the greatest misfits in the story is Mary and Joseph. First, they're having a child out of wedlock. Misfit. Like, there's still a faux pas about that. Like, that can be a tough thing. You have to explain that to some people. Maybe people will judge you or whatever. But back then, oof. Here's another weird thing about Mary, probably, and maybe Joseph had to tell this to some people. She was pregnant, but a virgin. At least that's what she claimed. There's only really been one of those. They thought that she was off her rocker in the community. That's why the wise men come, and they don't show up at the manger. They show up at the house. They stayed in Bethlehem for a bit. They probably stayed in Bethlehem for a bit because it's like, do we really want to go back there? How those people treated us when we were there. We don't even know what to do next. They were misfits. And here's another way I know they were misfits. They show up. We know the old story. They show up to the inn, and there's no room at the inn. You know what that means, right? They're poor. Do you ever travel with a rich person? Ever done that? I've traveled with a rich person before. I remember this rich person I traveled with. We were traveling for this work thing. It was like a production thing that we had to do. Like, we were going to be on camera doing stuff, like doing a presentation or something. And we had to travel to like the 6th richest district in the United States, Greenwich, Connecticut. I mean, it was like really rich, and they knew it. We showed up, and we flew this plane, and we got there, and we arrived at this hotel where it felt like you had to have a base level of French just to enter in. They would chuck you out if you couldn't say bonjour or something. They were like, it was lofty, all right? It was like $500 just to enter the lobby, probably. I don't even know what a room cost. I was with a rich guy. It didn't matter. And we stroll in there. We go to the front desk. Now, what had happened is when we got in the lobby, this other guy met us. He was a videographer who was going to be filming this thing. We didn't know him from anyone. He just met us there in the lobby, and we go up to the front desk, the 3 of us together, the 3 wise men, 3 amigos. And the rich guy's like, "Here's my name," and gives the name. They're like, "Oh, here's your room key, sir." Then they looked at me, and I was like, with him. And they're like, "Oh, here's your room key, sir." And then looked at the videographer. He's like, "I don't have a room." And he kind of like looked at us. And I looked at the rich guy, because I wasn't going to be able to do anything about it. And the rich guy looked away. So then I was like, oh, man. So I look at this guy again, and I was like, okay. You can stay with me, I guess. And I asked the lady at the front, she's like, "How big's the bed? Are we talking like king size? What are we doing here?" I have like a rule of life. You might have this too. Like, don't stay in bed with a strange man with video equipment. It's just like this thing I live by. But here we are. Like, this is what's going to happen. And it was just awkward. And this guy's like, "Yeah, this will be cool. We'll share rooms, have a free ride, whatever." And then the rich guy like couldn't take it anymore. He's like, "I'll cover it." And he just like flops down $16,000, and he gets the guy a room. All of a sudden, there was room at the end. So he made a way for it. I didn't really plan on talking about this story, but I forgot my belt today, and my wife gave it to me in the lobby. And I was thinking about that because we're in the richest place ever, all right? The nicest place ever. And we're in the lobby before our car gets there to take us to this thing that we're doing. And we're just standing there, and the guy who's rich with me, he's wearing a suit, but he's not the type of guy who wears a suit. And he's like, I forgot my belt. And I was like, well, you look ridiculous. You got to have a belt to wear a suit. I got my belt here. And we're standing in the lobby, and I take off my belt, and I hand it to him, and he starts putting on, and he gets it stuck in the back loop because I have this big, junky belt from like American Eagle when I was 16 or something. He's trying to put on a suit. So I get behind him. I'm helping him with the loop. I was like, your shirt's untucked. And I'm tucking in his shirt. And then he gets the belt on. He's like, you're too skinny. Like, this belt doesn't fit me. And so he takes it back off, and then I'm putting it back on. And the whole place, there's all these business people doing deals. They all stop and are watching us. This is Brokeback scene, these yokels from Missouri. And the videographer's watching. He's like, oh yeah, like he's loving it. It's just this weird thing going on. But you travel with a rich guy, and it gets you to places that you couldn't get to otherwise. If they show up at that inn, they're like, sorry, we don't have rooms, and Joseph pulls out a bankroll, all of a sudden there's going to be room for them. At the inn or at someone's house, they're poor. We see this in Luke. In Luke 2, they're 2:22, they're going to go and consecrate the kid, Jesus. This is a law. It comes from like the Abraham thing where Abraham is willing to sacrifice his son, and then something stands in the place. It's a picture of Jesus. But before we knew it was a picture of Jesus, it was just a sacrificial thing. So you go and you take a lamb at a certain time and you consecrate your kid at the temple. They go to the temple and they're going to consecrate their kid. And it says, I think in verse 24 of Luke 2, that they just give him a couple birds. And you're like, not those birds, different birds. They give him like these turtle doves or whatever. And they give him these birds, pigeons. They give him these birds. And it's like, well, they're supposed to give a lamb. And it's like, nope. Leviticus 12, there's a provision. In 12:8, there's a provision. Like, if you're so poor you can't afford the lamb, there'll be some birds available. Use those. And that's why in the temple, they had an area where if you didn't have a sacrifice, you could go buy these birds and use them. And the birds were like, they weren't Tickle Me Elmo. They were Tickle Me Elmo the second year. They were super cheap. And so they could afford that. They were poor. It's like, well, then they had to run for their lives. Why did they stay in Bethlehem? Probably because they were ostracized, also because they couldn't afford to move. And then what happens? Some wise men show up, God's provision, frankincense, gold, and myrrh. You know what they did? They got a marketplace, I think, and sold that stuff so they could afford the minivan and the car seat to get Jesus to Egypt. That's how they funded their trip. They couldn't fund that trip because they were poor. They were misfits. They had to leverage the gifts that God gave them from the east so that they could go to the west. They were young, pioneering misfits whose world had been turned upside down. And that's who Jesus chooses. This is all throughout the Bible, this theme. You can find it everywhere. 1 Corinthians 1, it says that God chose what was foolish in this world to shame the wise. That's why the shepherds. He comes to the shepherds. He could have come to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the ruling council, the scribes. He could have come to the smartest person on earth. He could have come to the ruler of Rome. Shepherds. Luke 5. Jesus says, I come to call sinners, not the righteous. The physician comes for the sick, not the well. In Luke 1, this is Mary singing. He says that this king is going to come and going to exalt the humble. Ephesians 2 says, you were far off, but you've been brought home. Psalm 34 says, the Lord is near the brokenhearted. Romans 5 says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, that he is the God of misfits, the God for misfits. He, like Rudolph's shiny nose that seemed like such a weakness, he takes our weaknesses and he turns them to his glory. God so loved the world. He came not to condemn the world, but to save the world. He so loved the world that he sent Jesus, and Jesus came and he's gone to prepare a place for us. And at Christmas, just like we sang, what we do is we prepare him room in our hearts. He's the ultimate rich guy. I love that saying in the Psalms where it's like we enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Why can we enter the gates of God with thanksgiving? Because entering the gates of God with thanksgiving indicates that we have something to be thankful for. What do we have to be thankful for? What we have to be thankful for is that we're misfit toys on an island without a home, and now he's brought us home. Thank you, your majesty. Thank you, King. He bought a room for us. He made a way for us. That's what he does, so we're thankful, and that's what we do at Christmas. Thankfully, we marvel along, following yonder star, past worldliness and hollow promises and scornful onlookers. We come to Bethlehem and see the very thing we've hoped for all along. That we in Christmas find our way home because Jesus found his way to us first. He came down our lane, jingle jangle, to surprise us by myth becoming fact. By truth arriving. So at Christmas, maybe you're a person who's been stuck and waiting, like John the Baptist's parents. They're stuck and waiting, stuck and waiting, stuck and waiting. See Jesus. Maybe you're forgotten and lesser, like the shepherds. Your family's getting together, you're the last one to know what's going on, you get the worst seat, no one treats you right, no one cares about you. Maybe at work, you have a terrible job, dead end. Jesus is calling you. He wants to use you and guide you and loves you. Maybe you just feel like all this is foreign to you. That's the wise men. Again, didn't speak the right language, wear the right things, they didn't know the right customs, the right traditions, and yet they bow before the king, leaving gifts. The true king. Maybe you feel poor or unsettled, or maybe you're foisted into circumstances beyond you. A young girl told she's having a baby. She wasn't ready for any of that. Maybe that's you. And what he does is he looks on you in those states and he delights in coming to you. He's the king of all, and he's the king of all of those things. And his majesty delights in misfits. It's in him we find our belonging. That we belong and we'll be taken, like those misfit toys, all the way home. It's Christmas. It's cold outside, but it's warm together because Jesus has come down our lane. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for your nativity. We thank you that there are so many stories that are just shadows of the great story, and we can enjoy those this time of year because they point to a deeper truth. So I pray that we would find the deeper truth, that we wouldn't stop short of it with traditions and money and stuff and whatever else. That's why we do an offering right now. It's so we can be generous, because we don't want to stop short of what you have for us. And what you have for us is beyond what we could fathom. It's yourself. God didn't give us gifts, he gave us himself. It's a wild notion. It's a world-altering notion. It's one worth yearning for and journeying for and hoping for, showing up for. It's one worth heralding and telling others about. So I pray that we could feel that joy. Many of us, we've Christmased. We've done Christmas a lot. The songs all kind of sound the same. We kind of know what we're going to talk about. But I pray we could see it for the first time. That by that star we'd see the light, and by that light we'd see everything else. Again, we just thank you for this time of year that it draws us together. I pray we could be together well, that we can be light and love during this time. We can be envoys of you, like the great star, and it's been chipped away, and there's little shards of light that are out, and we're that. So I pray we would help guide other people on their path too, and that all of us would just stagger up whatever we're carrying with us and lay it down and just be at peace with the Prince of Peace. We could arrive to that manger together, and we could marvel at you, and we could ponder these things in our heart this holiday season. We thank you for you. We thank you for Christmas. We thank you for the hope you bring to all. We thank you for your light. Pray it shines brightly in our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen.